Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 134 for Monday, March 29th, 2021. My name is Joel Duggan, and joining me as always is Jonny, aka Pillars of Darkness Pixel Riffs. Hello, sir.
Hello, here we are, and if you want to listen into the render distance, the extended version of the show, this week you can hear Joel and I talking all about custom PC peripherals. I've been contemplating getting myself a custom keyboard built, and yeah, we go into the wild world of everything that is out there, the keyboards, the mice, and everything in between, which for me is very little, thankfully. I try and keep my desk as clean as possible, but yeah, about to become a little bit more cluttered if I start to assemble a custom keyboard. How you doing, Joel? How is your week in Minecraft?
So I have built a wall. Just one.
You sure have. It's a good-looking wall, let me tell you.
Thank you. It's a large wall.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot how deep. I shouldn't say how deep the river is. How high the surface is that I'm building on in this part of the town. The other part of the town is much closer to the river level, or sea level 63. The higher, more eastern part of the medieval town on the Citadel right now is more around like 76 or 77. So when the wall is around 80, and then you're bringing that down to 63, you're like, oh, wow, I can't reach this from the ground. I have to do a lot of scaffolding work. I have to do a lot of up and down, and especially when you have to adjust it. So I had attempted to solve my stone church problem by moving the wall because the wall was too close. I knew it had to move anyway. And rather than trying to come up with a way to decorate the church or where to put the windows, I thought, I need to put this wall up so I can understand what parts of the church I can even see to decorate. Because if I can't see it, why am I putting, an 8-block tall window that's going to stare at the curtain wall 4 feet away?
Yeah.
So I went through and did that. And the first iteration, I was pretty happy with it. I tried to add another tower. I still might have to add in towers for consistency. I just don't know how and where yet. The problem, of course, is that a tower too far inside reduces the space in the church courtyard, which I don't want to do. I tried an angled tower, like I tried to build a 45-degree tower, and it just didn't jive. And I think it was just because it was the scale. It was 6 by 6 blocks, and I think for that kind of thing to work, you might have to go twice that size. Like you might have to be looking at 12 by 12 or 13 by 13 or something like large enough to really get enough detail in there to make it feel less chunky,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I'm quite happy with this. I just kind of remembered some things from art school in terms of like having churches that had walls around them that would have different shapes and echoing the idea of steeples or churches, but like horizontally on the ground and whatnot. And it took a little bit of work to get the Marlins and the battlement right. But it worked out quite well. I had to make some sacrifices with the gate. I miscalculated on the east gate, and I had to move the tower or the wall forward one, which means I lost some of the diorite detail from the front, but it was fine. But yeah, I'm quite happy with it, the way that it now connects all the way around. And I didn't realize it at first, but this actually completes the curtain wall. There's some detail yet to be put in, like little stone bits and stuff like that. But I don't want to do all the texture on the wall until I know what's in front of it. Like I'm not going to texture stuff and then cover it up with bushes,
Sure,
So
yeah.
I'm going to wait. I'm going to landscape the east gate there. I'm going to put in some trees and bushes and stuff and then decide, where I need some flourishes and whatnot. But the subject came up in chat this weekend about how long is the wall? How much wall have I actually completed? And now this is a guess. I just kind of took a quick measurement of 24 blocks-ish, which is 24 meters, and then kind of like did a quick visual measurement around the entire town where there's a wall, and it's a little over a kilometer of curtain wall.
Yeah.
Now, and this isn't a big build. Like I've seen much bigger towns and much bigger walls in Minecraft. So it really is quick how much it adds up. And to me, in real life, to think about building a wall over a kilometer, that's nuts.
It sure is, yeah.
That's crazy.
That's such a great milestone, though, for the town project in general, is like completing that perimeter. It really gives you a sense of like, okay, these are now the boundaries of this project. And obviously, over time, you're going to build up some stuff outside of those boundaries here and there, of course. But it's nice to have that kind of that milestone reached, and it can certainly help a project feel a little bit more contained, and you're making decisions based on, well, okay, if the walls were put here first, how would people then have built around and on and through those? So that's looking great so far.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and it's been a good learning curve. A lot of lessons learned. All the talk we have about building in odd numbers being easier in Minecraft. Not when you're putting marlins on top of a wall. Evens. Go evens, folks. It's much easier on you. Much easier on you. Trying to, especially if you're using stairs, because stairs, of course, will only work in one direction. If you go the other way, then they have this little gap in them. I mean, unless you want that gap. But generally speaking, it's a lot easier to do it with even numbers, which I have to keep on remembering. And I did the classic mistake of drawing this arc using the map mod that we have on the Citadel just to kind of help with these larger projects. And having this really nice curve, it goes all the way down around the church and it curved back up and it connected to the other wall, only to realize that I had connected the outside of one part to the inside of the other.
And it forms like a Mobius strip of wall. You're like, wait a second.
I am both inside and outside the wall at the same time.
It's metaphysical at that stage, and I'm not sure it's going to blow the minds of the townspeople ever so slightly.
Yeah, so there was a very audible sigh on stream this weekend, and then I tore part of it down and built it again. I'm glad I caught it when I did, though. I caught it before I made it three blocks thick. Like it was only the one wall that I was like, oh crap, that's why this isn't working out, right? But yeah, that's it for me. I know we did touch on this, or you've touched on it a little bit before, and I wanted to ask you last week, but we got off on a tangent. How is teaching your brother-in-law Minecraft going?
Oh, it's going well. He's actually started streaming independently from a single-player world now as well, so he is discovering a lot of stuff with the help of his chat.
Nice.
But yeah, is slowly making his way through the game. And I'd introduced him to a couple of concepts like enchanting. We've been to the Nether once, that kind of thing. And he's now got to the point where he's built himself a house. It's got a roof. He's working on a few kind of details. And we're not going crazy on like, you need to add depth to your builds and all of this kind of stuff. He's just building whatever he feels like building, really. And he's like, I'm going to put a window here so that I can, have a wraparound section on a corner and see out when it's daytime and nighttime and that kind of stuff. But he's adopted a cat that brings him stuff every night. So he's learning about some of the mechanics of like, how pets work and stuff like that. He's got a level 30 enchanting setup now. He hasn't been to the Nether in that world yet, I don't think, but yeah, I think we're actually going to be playing a little bit more tonight if he's got time, and so at the time this podcast goes out, we may be into the next little section of what we're doing in our kind of co-op world, and we might be going further into the Nether looking for another fortress or a bastion or something like that, and if we can get to it, we'll do potion brewing and stuff like that. So
nice.
He's learning in stages, taking his time in a single-player world, and then getting like the crash course in progression from me, which I really think is the way it should go. I feel like exploring some of that more out there stuff that's very like circumstantial, and if you stumble upon something, then it's great, but it's not like the critical path. I feel like that's stuff that you can absolutely go and explore on your own time. So he's constantly being surprised by that stuff.
Yeah, individual interests will tug you down different lines in Minecraft, but if you need to get from point A to point B, you need to know like the steps, and then how you meander through those, either directly or indirectly, is sometimes better up to you. That's really cool. I'm curious to see what he thinks about bastions, because I know that met with some rough feedback, I think, from I guess myself and other people in the Minecraft community, but with him being out of the game so long, everything is just brand new and quote unquote like the way it is, not having examples of other things for years and years and years to build on. So, and
the biggest generated structure he's seen so far has been a desert temple. So if we run into like a treasure bastion or something and it's like this monolith out there in the lava, I feel like it's going to make a good first impression. So we'll see what we can find, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's Pillager Outpost. Has he seen one of those yet?
I think so, but even that is like, it's relatively small by comparison. Speaking of landmarks of the Nether, though, this week I rebuilt a Nether fortress at the museum, which was quite the task. And it's not exactly rebuilt as such. I wanted to kind of do an anatomy of a Nether fortress. I wanted to kind of study all of the components of them, but naturally the components are just going to kind of repeat themselves in certain patterns when it generates, right? They normally generate with like a ton of outer walkways and whatnot, which I thought there's no real point in just producing a ton of these that are all going to look the same. for the purposes of like showcasing it at the museum. So what I did instead was I made a small section of walkway across roads and had that leading up to a couple of like example blaze spawners. Obviously, I don't have the spawners because I would have to cheat them in using commands or something. But then one of the walkways leads to the inside section where there are a few landmark rooms. And it's interesting to discuss that for an audience and explain and kind of learn my way through the fact that Nether Fortress is actually generated in quite a specific way. When you go through that room with the lava source in that kind of circle in the center, that is you entering the inside of the Nether Fortress. And you won't find blaze spawners once you get past that point. You're going to find loot chests in there. You're probably going to find wither skeletons all over the place, but you won't find a blaze spawner by going that way. Blaze spawners are always on the outside. It's just that sometimes the way they generate is inside nether terrain, so we think of them as being an indoor feature when actually they're not. And I don't know, I never really looked at a nether fortress this way until I had to build one from scratch. And luckily, with all of the different components, I added one of those balconies, I added the stairs with the netherwart growing around it, a little corridor further up in the fortress that's still technically part of the inside. A lot of that stuff fit into a fairly small area. So I have something that's no larger than what is currently the other largest room in the museum, which is the room that has all of the trees in. And it turned out to be quite a good exhibit. I am hesitant to say I'm going to reproduce a bastion there, though. I think probably what I'll do is maybe a couple of sections of them, because for a start, they're so ruined that it's kind of difficult to reproduce them. The amount of like minute detail and like there's a couple of missing blocks here and there is going to be very difficult to reproduce. What I might do instead is maybe I'll do a small kind of cutout section that illustrates this is the central treasure chamber of a big old treasure bastion, and maybe like a section of the bridge where they've got that kind of like pig statue made of gold blocks and that kind of thing. And I'll do set pieces like that, but rather than reproduce an entire monolithic bastion in the overworld, it'd just take too much time. I think I've got to play the hits for the bastion rebuild.
Almost like a diorama, like when you walk around those museum exhibits and it's like early man and it's like some model behind glass with like, that would be kind of neat actually, putting it all behind glass and having it light up as you go along or something.
Yeah,
that'd be kind of cool.
That's kind of what I've done with the biomes so far. So the biomes, some of the other generated structures, they're just like, small slices of them that you can walk through or around and see what the unique resources are, but it's not like exploring an entire desert in the middle of the museum.
Yeah. Was that just for the overworld biomes, or did you do the nether biomes too?
I've done the nether biomes on the opposite side, so the exhibits kind of branch out into like what you can find in the overworld, and then as you go around the sort of central ring of exhibits outside of the main hall, it goes through the progression of Minecraft from like just grass and trees and stuff to getting wood, then stone types, ores, tools, and then into diamond. And once you get diamond, obviously that opens up access to obsidian, getting to the nether, and the kind of natural progression, obviously avoiding stuff like, hey, you can make a nether portal just using buckets if you want to, I like the idea of creating a kind of the core gameplay loop of Minecraft is also the kind of loop that you walk around as you go through the first stages of the museum, and then it branches outwards from there into the different dimensions and everything.
Nice. How are you going to handle end cities?
That's an interesting one. I will probably try and rebuild them, but I don't know exactly where yet. And I feel like building them in the sky almost makes sense because the end is more like a kind of floating dimension, but also it's not going to look like it's in the void at all. So I'm not certain, but I do have a stronghold portal directly below the museum is where I chose to build the museum, was over the top of a stronghold. So in theory, I could do a whole exhibit about the end down there. I just don't know quite how I want to handle that yet. But yeah, I'm open to building, like, again, the components of an end city, maybe all separate and all just like at ground level so you can look up at the individual pieces. I definitely want to reproduce an end ship, but those are the ones that always look the same. They are just clearly made out of several different component parts all stitched together, versus something like a bastion that feels a lot more organic and a lot more broken down.
It's funny. I'm embarrassed to say that we have not done anything with our end portal on the Citadel. 4 years in, nothing. Still, it's just the standard stronghold portal. You just walk up a set of stairs. You can see the hole where the the spawner used to be, the silverfish spawner, and that's it. I mean, the end itself, we've done a lot of work on. That's been a lot of fun. But the actual portal, we're just like, nope. We walk through it for 2 seconds.
I was trying to think, because I don't go to the end all that much right now, and I was trying to think what I did with it in the survival guide world. My first stronghold, I turned into, I kind of like cut out the entire room, put a box of black concrete around it, and as you go into the nether portal to get there, it's like you appear in the end, and there are islands made out of end stone and little chorus plants growing around and stuff, and the portal is just in the center of that room. There's even a bed nearby with some fire lit around it, just to kind of, you can set your spawn here, but remember, beds explode in the end, and just like little pieces like that, that's just kind of, I guess, part of the fabric of my tutorial world. I spent a bit of time out of the tutorial world, though, and I'll probably make an episode of Survival Guide about this, but I tried out the half-hearted hardcore challenge that folks like Slice Lime and Bruno Danoy have been playing a lot, and it was more fun than I expected, to be honest. Like, I know I've talked about, you know, not really enjoying hardcore as an experience, especially when people expect you to have like a longer term experience of hardcore and try and keep a world going for as long as possible. But I was doing this because of it basically being a reward for a charity stream that I did a while ago, and saying, okay, I will do one stream in half-heart hardcore just to see how well I do. And so in the knowledge that I didn't have to keep this world, and I could either play a little bit recklessly or not be too disappointed when I inevitably lost the world, I had a lot more fun. And the first world actually lasted for about 2 hours, which I was very happy with in the end. I managed to survive on the surface for quite a while, even though the first night that fell, I didn't have a bed, because I started on like an island that had one tree, and I had to swim to try and find land. So I was like smelting my first, like getting some charcoal and getting a couple of things set up, and using the furnace to light up some of the area around me because I didn't have enough torches. I narrowly avoided getting shot in the back by a skeleton, which would have been a death. And then, there were a few other things. I think I found a drowned at one point that probably had a trident, but he was stuck in one of those ruined ocean houses that's just on the shore. And I managed to jump up and hit him with an axe a couple of times. So this was in the 1.17 snapshots as well. I decided to do it in last week's snapshot, or rather the week before the last snapshot, because we didn't get a snapshot last week. And so I wasn't really interacting with any of the new stuff they've added, the copper changes and whatnot. I was just going for, okay, how do we survive in this kind of environment now? How do we find iron? I was doing more mining in aquifers, using doors to create air pockets and finding iron that way. And I think in that world, I only died because I swam into a cave. My goal was really to get down to those like deep slate levels of the world. I got down there, I swam up into a cave, and then I exited the swimming animation, and my head ended up getting into a block in the ceiling as I was coming out of this pool of water, and I died of suffocation. And that was it was like the glitchiest way I could have died in the circumstances, which felt really bad. But
that's why I don't play hardcore.
Exactly, right? And with half a heart, like just 1 point of damage. It was so fun. Basically making my chat incredibly tense by swimming around and only getting into like a pocket created by a door, like an air pocket just in there at the very last second before my breath meter ran out, because they're like, you just need to take 1 point of drowning damage and you're dead. And I was like, I know, I'm very careful. The next world, I built a nether portal using the bucket method, and then went, oh, okay, like we can light this now. I dropped off the top of it, fell 4 blocks, and died because I took 1 point of full damage. So again, that world didn't last as long. And then the last one, I ended up getting some diamonds from like digging down to bedrock level at -64. So it was fun. It was a laugh, and definitely more fun than I expected. So I'm thinking about maybe doing like a one-off survival guide episode about like, hey, here's a fun thing that you might want to try out if you want to completely recontextualize damage, because we're so used to skipping through the world, taking occasional points of damage, but knowing that you can heal up. If absolutely anything that deals damage to you kills you instantly, then it really makes you rethink the way you play the game. Perhaps not for the better, but it's a really fun way of doing things.
Yeah, there's like a hashtag ankles in my chat because I jump off of stuff without a care in the world. So often. I mean, this 14-15 high block wall was jumping off many a time. Most of the time into the river, not always.
Yes.
Just zero cares. I got down to like 2.5 hearts and thought I should probably eat some carrots and regen before I actually die. And because I'm always sleeping in a bed nearby, so even if I did die, it's not the end of the world. But it's just one of those things where like I'm beyond caring how many deaths I have on the server. Like I've taken off with rockets and scraped my face across a tree and exploded into a yard sale.
Yeah,
I just don't care anymore. But yeah, like that's how it would happen to me. I would jump off of something. I would fall off of something because I suck at parkour. It would just be something inconsequential where I would just end up being like, oh, okay, fine. I would lose my patience with a wandering trader, and one of the llamas would kill me. Like that's how how it would go.
Just spit at you. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And death by llama is probably the cause of at least a dozen hardcore deaths, I would expect. But I did a test run of it at first, and I managed to get to the Nether pretty quickly. And I thought I was immediately going to get killed by piglins, but I managed to scrounge enough gold that I could make myself a gold helmet. I even ended up bartering with a couple of them before they spotted me. So, yeah, it's fun. You can get quite a long way. People have proven that it's possible to beat Minecraft that way. And you have to pillar up into the air and shoot at the dragon from above before it, like, flies up to you. But, yeah, there's definitely some fun to be had there. Anyway, all of this careful gameplay kind of came to a head when this weekend, just yesterday, I was part of another Clash of the Creators. So I teamed up with Impulse SV, iJevin, and Jessassin, and the theme this time was 25 deeds. So they'd made basically custom advancements for all kinds of stuff that was a little bit off the beaten path and trying to, use so much of the overlooked aspects of Minecraft, or give us challenges that required a little bit more prep time so that it wasn't just a mad scramble to get all of the cheap achievements right at the beginning. The Bedrock achievements competition had been that where, everything is just in a village where you start out. So you make bread, you make a cake, you find and kill a rabbit, you cook and eat a pork chop, that kind of stuff. So it was fewer of those things and more stuff that required a little bit of broader knowledge of the game and strategy. Stuff like smelting a wet sponge from an ocean monument, finding all 5 types of village, which were definitely within the area that we were in, like a 3,000 block world border. So they picked a pretty great seed for it. Get nausea and get blindness, which requires you to know that you can only get nausea from a pufferfish and you can only get blindness from a specific type of suspicious stew. There was one achievement that was just fall into the void, which a couple of teams got, our team included, but the first team that got it was Logical Geek Boy's team. A friend of the show, Logical Geek Boy, made a contraption that broke bedrock in the overworld and fell into the void that way instead of worrying about finding the stronghold. And that was
nice.
I don't know if he broke bedrock or if he just like ender pearled through it or something, but that was pretty clever, I think. So yeah, pretty fun way of doing that. His technical knowledge, like I scrubbed through his VOD to try and find it, and he knows exactly where a spot is in the bedrock because bedrock generates the same way in every world. He basically found a place where the bedrock was like really thin at the bottom of the world and have enough space for him to build what he needed to build. So yeah, it's so impressive. Like there's such great knowledge from that group of creators, and yeah, I had a couple of moments like that myself. The highlight for me was teaching Impulse something he didn't know about villagers.
Nice.
Considering that Impulse basically wrote the book on like villager breeders and stuff back in the day.
Yep.
We were talking Jessassin through curing a villager in one of those igloo research stations that just has a zombie villager in there and the supplies you need. It was a really great find, but I don't think he'd bothered curing them before. And so we were talking him through how to do it, and I said, put the iron bars back in there, because having more iron bars around a zombie villager actually allows them to cure faster. And apparently Impulse had never heard of that, and he was like, you're making stuff up now. Like, surely that is not a thing. But no, it is. Having iron bars and beds around a villager basically kind of encourages the player to like lock them up like a prisoner until they are cured of the zombie sickness or whatever. And yeah, it's a really fun way of doing things. So I'll leave a clip of that in the show notes this week if I can find it. There are a couple of other really fun moments, and this is what I love the most about these things. I'm not really that interested in the competitive side of things. I just like, the moments that it generates. Like, I was going for the first desert temple that we had found, and as I was going there, I heard an explosion in the distance, and I thought either another player, I didn't know if anybody was like around me at the time, another player is caving in this area and has just like exploded a creeper, or a mob has generated inside the chest room under the desert temple and has walked over the pressure plate and blown the entire thing up. And so I got to the desert temple, dug down 3 blocks, there was just a crater underneath this thing, and I was like, well, moving on from that. Not getting the loot from that desert temple. It was so funny just hearing this explosion in the distance and knowing, I know what that was. At one point, I was trying to copy paste and get the coordinates for our spawn point so I could make sure I was heading in the right direction. I don't know what keyboard shortcut I hit, but I accidentally enabled the narrator, like the accessibility feature that says everything that's on the screen. And so on the stream, there was about like 7 seconds of audio chaos where I'm trying to go through the menu and it's going options, controls, video settings, audio settings, controls, accessibility settings, narrator off, and it's just reading everything I'm doing. And yeah, there were just such great moments like that in this whole like 2-hour event. I will share one last thing that I learned some speedrun strats from iJevin, who speedruns all the time now. There's a really neat way of finding buried treasure once you've located one of those treasure maps from a shipwreck. And unfortunately, this only applies to Java Edition because it has to do with the debug information. If you go to the general area around the X on the map, if you're in the same chunk as where the buried treasure is, it is always on, I think, the 9th block over, in both horizontal directions. Like if you go to look at your chunk data in the F3 debug and it says 9, like 15, 9 on the chunk data, that is basically your coordinates within the chunk itself, relative to the chunk rather than relative to the entire world. If you dig down at 9, 14, 9, you will always find the treasure chest below that block, and it's flawless. Like I found like 3 or 4 buried treasures in the course of this, because one of the other things on the list was like to get a Heart of the Sea from a buried treasure chest, and he explained that I'm never finding treasure another way again. Like none of this like digging up an entire beach. Like you can always find it exactly the same way now, and that may change in future if they change more about world generation. But apparently speedrunners have ways like that where like specific coordinates in a chunk will lead you to that. It'll lead you directly to where the end portal room spawns in a stronghold. There's so many little tips and tricks like that everyone has something to bring to the table in these events. So it was phenomenal. I had a great time.
That sounds really cool. Yeah, like it doesn't surprise me actually that you have that kind of in-game depth knowledge for speed runs, because you need it. Like the margin for error is seconds.
Yeah,
you know. So having that knowledge for end portal, for treasures, for I'm trying to think about what else might generate. I guess, it wouldn't really matter for the ruined nether portals. But I'm just trying to think about other things.
He had a trick for finding the nether fortress after he found a bastion as well. He said like the bastion was in positive, negative coordinates, so like in positive X, negative Z. And then he said, okay, so there's about a 40% chance that it's going to be in negative X, negative Z if I go this way. And then he found a nether fortress. And I was like, dude, like there's a few different things he was talking about terminology that I'd never heard before. So yeah, like go and check out some speedrunners, man. They've got some wild strats if you're trying to find stuff in a time sensitive environment, for sure.
It beats my strategy of digging a straight line until you see something.
Oh yes, yeah, beats my strategy of like find a saddle to get a strider and go around a lava lake for 20 minutes.
Yeah. My strategy in the Nether has always been to dig up high to the point where you're still going to come out into like chasms of things, but if you get yourself out above a lava lake, you can see a lot farther and potentially see like a fortress or something in the distance. That's usually the thing. I will say that they're easier to spot now with the nether biomes. They stand out more.
Yeah, definitely.
A lot of the time.
They've got some contrast now, right?
Yeah. It's I remember that line from Star Wars. Like, instead of a big dark blur, I'm looking at a big light blur. It's still hard to see, but you can sort of see what's going on. Speaking of villagers and Impulse, by the way, I am going to be needing to go and do some villager research myself, because several server mates have been doing some AFK trying to restock our farms because they weren't working. The chicken farm restocked as planned, so did the creeper farm, but all of our villager farms, the potatoes, the carrots, the wheat, nothing was working. And so we hadn't changed any of it for a very long time, and I've come to be informed that the light level farming now does not work. So if you have a room that's 9x7 and the windows at one end, if the idea was that you would have a villager with carrots in their inventory, they would plant carrots everywhere, and there would be one or two spots at the back of the room that they would constantly try to plant carrots on, and they would not stay there because when they walked on a pressure plate, it would update the block, and the block would say, the light level is too low, and pop off the planted food. And then obviously it doesn't work with things like beetroot because they have seeds, not the actual thing. But potatoes and carrots, it works fine. And so that doesn't work anymore. So we've been I've been making golden carrots and eating carrots and wondering, why are our carrot stores not being refilled? And I have this giant network underneath the meadows of like waterways and filters and a greenhouse. Like, it's a really robust system that I'm very quite proud of. And I need to fix it. Like, and apparently now you need to have like a second villager for the other villager to throw food at.
That's the way I've seen carrot farms working since, I guess, 1.15 or so.
Yeah. It's the profession change. And the other thing that I didn't realize, and of course, again, these were all built before 1.14 probably. The wheat farm, now it wasn't collecting anything because the minecart system underneath it had stopped. It's probably just a matter of a chunk border or chunk loading or something. But and it works most of the time. It does very seldom does it turn off, and I don't have a fail-safe system for it. Pretty compact build, not a lot of room. But again, in order for the farmer to be a farmer, there has to be a composter in the room. Well, one of the updates that they made is that the composter will actually be used by the farmer to make bone meal. And then the bone meal gets picked up by the hopper minecart, which is fine, except for it clogs the system. And then you've got bone meal going into your wheat filter. So I had to assess that, and there's going to be some changes there. But I'm going to have to... that farm is going to be easier to fix because, I have a filter for seeds, and we've got a couple of double chests full of seeds if anybody ever needs them. But the rest of the seeds are just being shot into a cactus. Well, duh, why are they being shot into a cactus? I should be shooting them into a composter. So I'm gonna do that and end up with a bone meal farm as well as a wheat farm, because it's a pretty consistent farm. Like, this is where everybody lives in the meadows, so this thing is going like constantly. So that's gonna change. I don't know how I'm gonna fix the wheat farm and stuff, because, or not the wheat farm, the carrots and the potatoes, because I don't want to remove the farms. I don't want to change the network underneath them. So I still need the villager that's being thrown food to be at the back. And so I don't exactly know. I need to do a little bit of research. And I know that Impulse SV, speaking of Impulse again, has done a video tutorial on those, like, villager throws carrots at other villager farm.
Yeah.
He built them in season 6, I think.
Yeah. I think him and Logical Geek Boy kind of collaborated on some stuff back when villager breeding and villager crop farms changed, and so there's like modular sections that each of them have kind of worked on. So yeah, there's some pretty robust designs out there now. I feel like some of it still feels like the first couple of times you build it, you're like, is this supposed to work? How exactly does this function? Which way around do I need to put the beds? But yeah, after a while, you'll get the hang of it for sure.
Speaking of Logic and Impulse, if you use the new search function on thespawnchunks.com, you can find the episodes where we interviewed them.
Hey, there it is. We've got a slightly better way of looking up old episodes, which we need to do right now because we're on episode 134 at this point, and we need to go back occasionally and see if we've repeated ourselves. But the reason I think we're waxing lyrical about what we've been doing in Minecraft this week, we're spending a little bit longer on the quick login than normal, is because... well, should we move on to the news, Joel?
Yeah. First point, there is no news. You can find the no news at nothinghappened.net.
I said before the show, I was like, it's quiet. It's almost too quiet because this is we're coming up to the week of April 1st. April 1st is on Thursday. And so potentially an April Fool's snapshot is impending. Now, before everybody gets on their high horse about what the developers should be doing with their time, I will point out that we did get a legit snapshot on April 2nd next year, and this year April 1st falls on a Thursday, so we might still get a Caves and Cliffs snapshot next week. But yeah, potentially the developers are also working on like a bit of April Fool's stuff, as they tend to do around this time of year. No pressure if they didn't want to do it, because I feel like 2020 has collectively been a year of April Fools on the entire world. But yeah, I don't know. They might have something, and it'll be interesting to see what direction they take it, since last year was the Infinity Snapshot, which felt so big that I don't know if they can really take it. Like, they can't one-up that, surely. And this isn't a challenge, this is just me being incredulous if they even thought about doing something that felt bigger than the Infinity Snapshot, which some people actually turned into like a YouTube series, or they would play in that snapshot like out of choice. So it'll be interesting to see if we get anything this week.
Pure speculation. I wonder if anything about that Infinity Snapshot and the way that the blocks were generated ended up being learned from and used in the way that caves are generated now.
I mean, it may well have been them kind of prototyping some stuff and artfully concealing it. It may well have been them just having a bit of fun, but then going, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
So it could have gone both ways. I expect that's the case with developing a game like this, where there's so much creativity, but also refinement and minimalism involved, is that occasionally they just need to cut loose and throw everything at the wall. Like, literally everything is how they kind of described the Infinity Snapshot in the first instance. But yeah, I expect they will have snuck in a couple of things that may have made it back into what they were doing with the next update.
And we saw that at Christmas time when they said that they're taking a couple of weeks off from Snapshots to do some in-game or in-house game jams for fun and trying to stretch the brain and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure that sometimes ideas from those game jams work their way back into Minecraft in a different form, obviously.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see what comes out. One thing that I will do as a kind of community spotlight in the absence of other news for you guys, we were looking a couple of weeks ago at the new OpenGL release being, I mean, the new edition of OpenGL 3.2, which is not a new OpenGL release, but that turning a lot of stuff in Minecraft into primarily shader-based rendering, and what people were going to do with that. And we kind of put out a call just to see like if anybody else was doing stuff, and if you know of any other folks out there, if you know of any other interesting shaders that we can take a look at and other possibilities now that Minecraft is shader based in terms of the rendering engine, then please do let us know, because it'd be cool to find stuff like this. I found this on Twitter, retweeted by a couple of people. A user named OnNowhere, who's a datapack creator and a map maker, has shared a shader called the Vertex Fade shader that they developed, and it fades in the landscape as you walk, but it does that by breaking apart and reassembling the faces of each block in front of you. So it's really quite a trippy look to things, but not like the kind of acid shaders style thing where the landscape curves away from you. The majority of the world in front of you is invisible, but it comes together in pieces, like it's kind of assembling the blocks in front of you out of each vertical face of the block. And they've later refined it a little and made it available for download, and it now even does non-full blocks. So things like, in the example image, stairs, lightning rods, because it's a snapshot thing, of course, and even mobs. There was a pig being kind of broken apart, end of Avengers Infinity War style, just kind of breaking into floating pieces. So there's some really interesting stuff being done, and at first they said this is kind of hacked together a little bit, but it seems to have been made a little bit more stable. I haven't tried this out myself, but honestly, I might give it a try at some point, because it doesn't seem particularly playable, but as an example of what you can now do with Minecraft's rendering, it's a pretty interesting example.
I did download it and did try it. I saw it first on our Discord earlier in the week, And I don't remember who chimed in, but someone immediately said, even just watching this makes me nauseous. And I can say, like, I get in there going like, ooh, wow, this is neat. Ooh, wow, this is making me sick. And it's like walking through a kaleidoscope. So what's happening is that the surface of each block is starting off very small and then rendering to its full size. So think of the surface of a block texture going from 2 by 2 pixels to 16 by 16 pixels, like it's being enlarged, and all sides of the block that you can see that's happening at the same time. What the visual, what's the word I'm looking for? The illusion that you see when you're walking through is it feels like pieces are coming in from the side to make up the blocks because, of course, the texture for a leaf block on the right side of a tree and the left side of the tree are the same texture. So your brain can't figure out where the texture is coming from because you're moving through space as it's getting larger.
Yeah.
And so it's like when you're looking through a kaleidoscope and everything is just twisting, and it's neat at first, but the combination of that twisting animation or a twisting illusion, but also the narrow field of view, like you can only see 16 blocks in front of you. So you're walking along, you're like, oh, there's a hill there, I can't go that way. Like, or oh, that's a tree, like there's a tree right in front of me. Like, so you can't see more than a few meters, like 10 meters in front of you. So it's not exactly playable. And I don't imagine if you did it with a larger render distance that one, you'd be able to see the effect, or two, it would be probably pretty hard on a system, I would think.
Because it's breaking up like exponentially more blocks as you increase the render distance. And that was really going to be my next question, was like, is it possible to drag a slider around and change the width of the world you're looking at? But
no, there's no options. It's just, shader pack on, or not shader pack, resource pack on, resource pack off. It's just like any other, if you change the texture of your pickaxe. Now, there might be something in the code that I don't know, that you could go in and change the render distance, but I didn't get that much into it because, again, like it didn't sit well with me. I have seen something similar. It's a fabric mod though, or at least it's a mod. CurseForge is terrible at giving me search results for things I'm not looking for, but it was called a chunk animation mod, and what it did was, like pillars coming up from the below, each 16 by 16 chunk would like move up from below until it would finally rest in the spot that it was supposed to be. Do you remember those little pin puzzles or pin knickknacks that you'd see where you put your hand underneath all the little metal pins, and an image of your hand would appear on the front of it? That's what it looked like, in terms of the world generating, but it was far enough away that you would be able to make a decision as to, I can't go that way. It was no different than your current render distance view, Yeah. And it was neat. It gave Minecraft more of a modern feel rather than just things kind of coming out of the fog. I actually have a shader that I use to take screenshots, and what it does for fog in that particular shader is that it actually pixelates things. So rather than having it just kind of like be fuzzy or have like an airbrush look, it actually kind of turns things into like lower resolution pixels, and there's sky space between the pixels, and it's a neat look. Like, it's not something I'd necessarily want to have all the time, but it's kind of a neat idea too.
Yeah, but it's just fascinating to me that stuff like this can now be done with just a resource pack, instead of cool. Existing what we think of as shader packs being done through Optifine and everything. So yeah, again, if you folks at home have any more of these that you've spotted out there in the wild, please do send an email, and we'll move into email now. The email address, if you want to email the show, is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. So our correspondence this week, one of which comes from another Joel, actually. It's Joel S. has written in with a potential lighting solution. Which says, "Hi, Joel and Jonny. I have an idea for a lighting solution which might fit in well with the feel of Minecraft and with the progression. It may also fit in well with the new features added in the Caves and Cliffs update. What about a new type of caving lantern that is directional? The crafting recipe could be the same as that of a regular lantern, but with an amethyst shard replacing one of the iron nuggets on the left or the right. This lantern would have twice the radius or reach of a regular lantern or torch on one side of the lantern, but on the other side it would have no light cast at all. This would give a good reason to farm geodes and would also make caving more interesting. Also, maybe it could use copper instead of iron in order to give copper more uses. The copper color might fit in better with a more grungy caving feel too. I would say Clever Quip here has left the chat, but I plan on sticking around. Joel. P.S. Jonny, I get startled sometimes when you refer to Joel by name on podcasts, since that's my name as well. So during your podcast, when you asked, what do you think, Joel? I decided to email you guys and let you know what I think about this potential lighting solution. Well, there you go. There's a way to get podcast listeners, is have a name that's the same as their name, so they'll always sit up and pay attention. Thank you so much for the email, other Joel. Current Joel, what do you, Joel Prime, if you will? What do you think about this potential lighting solution?
Oh man, 80s Transformers flashbacks. I am down with that. I am down with that nickname. And by no means did Joel's name influence the fact that I'm the one that picked the email for the show this week.
Favoritism?
Not at all. Not at all. I don't know if it's technically possible, but I like the idea. With the way that light works in Minecraft, generally the thing just kind of emits light in all directions possible unless a light blocking block blocks the light. That was a lot of blocks in one sentence.
I mean, for a game like Minecraft, it suits it.
Yeah. Right? The longer cast of light in one direction and the restriction of either little or no light in the other direction, I think is actually a really good balance. Like, because, players and us have been talking about, well, if it's going to be that dark in these big caves, we're going to need something. And people, the first thing that most people have been writing in about is like a wider radius on a torch, like a torch that does 30 or 32 or, some other larger distance in terms of a radius. But a directional torch that did 32 in one direction, but then nothing or very little, like maybe 3 blocks in the other direction. In terms of not a torch, sorry, he mentioned a lantern. I think is really smart. It's kind of like a Minecraft version of a flashlight.
Yeah, or like a miner's headlamp is the first place my brain went. So yeah, there's definitely some merit to this. Again, yeah, like you, technically, I don't know how this would work because a lot of stuff in Minecraft, it emits light omnidirectionally, but if you just emit light in one direction, it still has to kind of fall off to either side. And in terms of the way this looks in the rendered environment, I imagine it's sort of looking like, remember when there would be occasional like snapshots or even versions of Minecraft, maybe issues with Optifine or something, where the lighting didn't cross chunk borders, and so if you placed a torch, you would find that one half of a chunk was still like not lit in the slightest when you were caving. That's how I imagine this looking. So I feel like while it feels like quite a natural and intuitive thing based on how light functions in the real world, applying that to Minecraft could have quite a strange feel if the light is effectively just cast in one direction and behind that it is still completely dark. I don't know, maybe gradiating the light as it got further back is possible, but then if it's going to cast basically a full beam in front of it, I'm not certain how that would look, especially if it's at a wider radius, of course. So
yeah, I think you'd get a more realistic version of this if you had something similar in RTX. Like you'd get to see how, like, well, and I think maybe even just putting the torch, a torch on a block tower on one side of the torch and then seeing how the light bounces around to behind that tower is probably a pretty good example of how it would work in real life using RTX. But whether or not that's possible in Java Minecraft, I don't know.
Yeah, it definitely seems like something that works better for rendering things than it does for the actual mechanics of block lights. And that is how directional lighting works in RTX. You can occlude the back faces of light source blocks like sea lanterns and have the light only cast one way. But if you take off the RTX effect, then you're just left with a room that is evenly lit as per the usual rules of block light.
Right. This got me thinking, though, when he was describing the crafting recipe of putting in like an amethyst shard in the lantern. I'm actually surprised that lanterns don't require glass panes on the left and the right already.
Yeah.
And that got me thinking, and a question for you, because you spend so much time in RTX now, how cool would it be if glass panes, and obviously stained glass panes, could be used in lantern construction to give you the rainbow of lanterns with the 16 colors that are currently in Minecraft?
It'd be so good for decorative stuff in like festival builds and stuff like that. I'm imagining like a Chinese kind of parade street scene or something like that with colored lanterns and all of the different kind of like paper lantern style things hanging from windows could be replicated so easily. And obviously people have built stuff like that before, probably using stained glass, and there are other ways of doing it, but with the scale. We talk a lot about sub-block details and having that flexibility in decorations like that would be so nice. Obviously, it's the kind of thing that is probably fairly minimal in terms of stuff they want to add to Minecraft lately, but they've also added 16, 17 colors of candle. So yeah, there's potential for stuff like that to be used as well. I still find myself overlooking features like candles when I think back on what's been added in Caves and Cliffs.
Yeah.
And I feel like I need to remind myself about some of that stuff pretty regularly, which actually kind of ties into our discussion topic. You've got a couple of more emails there, but I think those also tied into the discussion topic. So do you want to cover those first, or do we want to get right into it?
Well, let's just get right into it. I can pop back to the other emails as well. The other emails are focused on the Deep Dark and some feedback that we got, so I thought that might tie into the discussion.
Great. So what I wanted to talk about this week really is, because we didn't have a snapshot, I was thinking we should kind of recap what's left for Caves and Cliffs, what we can expect next in Java snapshots. And we're going to focus on Java, of course, because that's where Joel and I have the most expertise, but it's also the version of the game where they've pumped out the most features in development, because they can release a Java snapshot every week instead of having it go through the beta program and be compatible with Windows and Xbox and Android and all of that stuff. So we've had a lot of Caves and Cliffs features come out. We've got stuff like, the new cave generation, new deep slate, different biomes. A ton of that stuff has started to pop up. We have copper, all of that. What we don't have yet is, and I'll cover the major features here. There may be a couple of other bits and pieces that they haven't fully implemented yet. Archaeology is a big one, including stuff like dig sites, brushes, ceramic shards, and potentially other rewards from archaeology and clay pots. We don't really know what the Deep Dark is, and that comes down to the Warden as a big one, but also the other blocks in the Skulk family and naturally generated Skulk sensors, where we're going to find those and potentially how we can reproduce them if we want them in larger quantities. New mountain generation has already been showcased in the Bedrock beta, but is yet to be implemented in Java, and likewise mountain goats are already implemented in Bedrock. They drop mutton, they drop goat horns, and the goat horns can be blown to make a pillager raid horn sound, but they have no other purpose so far. So we're looking at basically 3 or 4 major features that they've announced for the Caves and Cliffs update at Minecraft Live, but we still haven't seen hide nor hair of in the Java Edition snapshots so far. So I wanted to bring this up for discussion and talk about maybe a bit of our hopes and our speculation for some of this stuff, and kind of remind us of the fact that some of these features are still coming, because it's easy to get lost in the caves. I mean, quite literally in some cases, but there's still a few other things gonna pop up here and there. Out of all of these, Joel, you have a couple of emails about the Deep Dark. Which of these do you think you're most excited for?
Out of the things that are left?
Yeah.
Oh, definitely the Deep Dark.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, don't get me wrong. New mountain generation, it looks amazing. It's going to add a lot, I think, aesthetically. Given how rare they appear to be in Bedrock, I don't know if it's going to necessarily add a lot of gameplay to Minecraft as much as it's just going to add a lot of, or add some reward to adventuring and all that kind of stuff. Like it's not something that it's not the top of my list, but it's not the bottom either. It sounds like it's a weird thing to say. It's like choosing your favorite kid. Like I don't, I'm excited for them, but I don't know what I can really say outside of I'm curious to see them. And of course, as someone that's not going to be starting a new world because the Citadel is going to update along with, I think, a lot of other multiplayer servers, I'm curious to know how they're going to mesh into existing worlds. And how that's going to work, including caves, like how that extension downward is also going to work as well. And as far as like mountain goats go, again, cool. They don't really offer anything so far that we know of, other than when you do find a rare mountain, you might be thrown off the side of it by a goat. So,
yes. I
mean, sure. But I don't see a reason, because we don't know what the horn does other than make a cool noise. I think it would be cool, this is pure speculation, but another nice tie-in with Minecraft Dungeons, if they can swing it, is if the blowing on the horn, the goat horn, had the same thing same attributes as the wind horn in Minecraft Dungeons, which would blow adversaries back by a couple of blocks.
Yes, like
I think that
a knockback effect, kind of similar to how goats themselves behave, I guess, would be
right.
An interesting.
How
way
much fun would it be to like be thrown off the cliff by a goat and then go get a goat horn and come back and go, look, mister, and then blow the goat off the side of the mountain. I think that would be very funny.
Yeah, exactly. Turnabout is fair play, and
exactly.
might have interesting implications for like PvP competitive Minecraft as well, like being able to grab if you're playing like Sky Wars or something like that, an enemy is bridging towards you, you happen to have found like a goat horn in a loot chest and you just blow them into the sky. I feel like that could be a little bit OP, but then, all it takes is a well-placed sword swing to do the same thing. So, could be. I like that idea a lot. That's very fun. As an advocate for the wind horn in Minecraft Dungeons.
Yeah. And, because it's very fun in Minecraft Dungeons to do that to bad guys. You're just like, I'm just done punching things right now. I just need a breath. And so you use the horn and you throw them off the cliff into the void or the lava or something like that. You're like, I don't need your emerald. I'm fine. I just need you to go away. And the other thing is that if you could take that horn and put it in a dispenser and have the dispenser do the same thing, that would also allow technical players to perhaps create farms. Like I think it'd be really cool to have like things coming along in a water stream and using that horn to displace them, or rather than waiting for mobs to walk between trapdoors or work their way off of a drop in a mob farm, you could just use these on a clock to be just like and it's just like dump them, and then you'd have an audio cue every time your mob farm is dumping new mobs. You're just like, well, it's working because I can hear it. Now, whether or not that would be annoying, I guess you'd have to build it more than 16 blocks away from you on a regular basis, just so that it's not like all over the place. But yeah, there's some possibilities there. So again, like not a lot to say about mountains and mountains goats. But I do think that the Deep Dark has got some possibilities, and I think this might be where we're going to see more of the stuff that Mojang didn't talk about in Minecraft Live. What do you think?
Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, they're keeping it fairly mysterious anyway, and naturally there's a lot to plumb in terms of lore and everything that is just going to be implied by the game itself. It's a great way of them to incorporate some more visual storytelling, and I think, there are still some things that are left unanswered, and I'm not certain if there may be sources for this elsewhere, but is Deep Slate, as we have it now, basically the block that was in the walls around where the warden was, or is that a different type of environment? Is that a different block that we're going to get later? How is that area going to be constructed? Are there still going to be those like structures like the one we saw in the demo video for the warden, or is that just going to be a thing that they've done as a set piece just to add some interest to that environment in the video? We're still not certain about some of these things being fully implemented. Even the entries on this in the Minecraft wiki, as I was looking back through some of these features, have a ton of temporary names because we don't know what some of the other skulk blocks are called. We don't know for sure what the warden has in terms of its ability to darken the area around you. There's a lot of stuff there, and there is definitely room for those features to be refined and more stuff to be added that we didn't know about from Minecraft Live.
One of the emails that we got actually about the Deep Dark from Firestar, a landscape artist member in our Discord, subject line was "Getting Dangerous in the Deep Dark. Hey, Jonny and Joel, I've been recently enjoying having the extra render distance to listen to every week." Well, that's great. Thank you. I had an idea for the Deep Dark that could make it a bit more dangerous. I feel that as strong as the warden is, you could avoid it by ducking under a pillar, or use like you do for avoiding an Enderman, or maybe pillaring up like you would do with an Iron Golem speedrun. I was thinking the underground, the world could go to Y-80, and then some sections of the Deep Dark could inflict void damage, and maybe you need a special potion or enchantment that would let you not have void damage between Y-64 and Y-80. I feel that this could really be a cool aspect of the Deep Dark, making it more dangerous and more interesting. Any thoughts? Stay chunky. My initial response is that I don't see them adding additional Y levels. So I like the idea of maybe some area effect damage, but I don't think it's going to be tied to going farther down than Y-64. However, because I think that the Deep Dark is going to be less of a an additional depth or a different dimension. My bet is that it's going to be very similar to the lush cave and the drip cave stone treatments that we've seen coming into the snapshot so far. I think I've referred to it as like biome paint last week or the week before.
Yeah.
And so I feel like the deep dark is going to be one of these biome paints that they'll put in any section. So it could be a deep dark cheese cave. It could be a deep dark spaghetti cave. It could be next to or not next to a lush cave. We don't know. But I feel like you're going to get a surface treatment to the existing topography in the zone of like probably -32 to -64, somewhere around that realm is my best guess. That said, though, we have some examples in the game already of things like magma blocks that will only damage you if you're walking on them without sneaking. It's not a lot of damage, but it's enough to, skew your view. Your character has that kind of hitch whenever it takes damage, and so it's not pleasant to be on them, even though they're not going to kill you very quickly. I was thinking that there might be a block within the realm of the skulk blocks that could deal that kind of damage in the same way that Firestar was thinking about like taking a constant tick in like a void damage situation. You could take a constant tick if you're standing on one of these skulk blocks or skulk fungus or like whatever it happens to be. And maybe if you're not sneaking, then it would give you damage. Or because we've seen that you have to sneak to potentially avoid the warden, maybe it would give you damage if you were not sneaking.
Yeah.
So the reverse of a magma block. So if you're sneaking, you'd be fine. But if you want to run away from the warden quickly, you'd start to take damage from these other blocks if you happen to step on them.
Or you could even give it an effect kind of like, almost like an inverse of the wither effect maybe, where it kind of, it starts an effect going that deals more and more damage over time. So that like the longer you stand on the skulk, maybe it ramps up the damage that it deals to you. And yeah, again, maybe that could be that could be ticking over in the background, but then not necessarily dealing damage to you while you're sneaking. But then as soon as you straighten up, it deals like a ton of damage to you at once, and then suddenly like fight or flight kicks in. I don't know.
Right.
There's some neat stuff they could do with that, and we don't really know what the nature of skulk is. And it seems like an infestation the way it spreads over blocks in its surroundings. From the screenshots and brief video that we've seen of it, it seems to kind of take over nearby blocks. We've already seen behavior like that from moss, albeit in a player-controlled and a much more benign way elsewhere in these caves. So it's not a far stretch to imagine it kind of spreading over time, a bit like, a corruption of sorts. Terraria players will be familiar with that as a concept because the kind of world evil in those worlds basically grows uncontrollably until you have a certain amount of technical progression that allows you to control it. And there's bits and pieces there that could be applied to Minecraft without them just, taking the idea from Terraria wholesale. I'm interested in what the skulk stuff does. And again, like skulk sensors are something that we've had a lot of input in so far because they're so technical and they introduce them independently of everything else, but we still don't know how those appear. As far as we've seen just in the environment they had in the demo of the Warden, they are just on the ground in these areas amongst the skulk blocks, but do they respawn there? Are they crafted out of other materials like that? That's the stuff that we still don't know.
I'm wondering if we end up getting a seed. Like if there's a similar to like a beetroot seed, like if you end up getting something that you have to plant, in specific ground, like you have to harvest a skulk sensor, you get a skulk seed, you have to harvest some skulk blocks in order to plant them because you can't plant them on anything else, and then run away and try to start your own skulk farm, or stay longer and try to harvest more and be greedy and potentially anger the warden. I don't know what we're going to get as far as the natural generation goes. I'm hoping for more decorative / vegetation or functional blocks in we'll call it the family of skulk blocks that you just mentioned. I feel like in the lush caves, we've got moss carpet, we've got cave vines, glowberries, there's
spore blossom,
drip leaf, spore blossom. Like there's a lot there. And I feel like in some of the biome brainstorming that we did last week, we were talking an awful lot about bioluminescence and like spores and like just different kind of alien looking things that are Minecraft and imaginative and not based on real world. And I think there's a real opportunity with the Deep Dark to have it not just be skulk sensors on the ground and the warden walking around. Like I feel like they could have stuff hanging from the walls. They could have, you know, some different environmental stuff. I'm not sure how they're going to do it. I know that they've got some like the spore, not the spore blossoms, the skulk blocks. I believe they kind of spread around, or they looked like they were spreading around. And it would be neat if the tendrils or the spread of that maybe looked more digital. Like what if it looked more like the Matrix, you know, like less of a natural kind of like what's the word I'm looking for? Like a root or an organic structure, and more like a digital thing. That could be neat. I don't know. So bringing in some sort of outer worldly or unexpected visual language into the Deep Dark would be really neat.
That's a very neat concept, actually. Like we obviously know of Minecraft as a game, unless you're like a little bit too immersed in Minecraft, I suppose. But it's interesting to me, the idea that the world itself would imply that it was digital, especially with Minecraft having been such a kind of fantasy feeling world thus far, with kind of swords and bows and like a lot of the blocks tending towards medieval in their construction, and it being kind of low tech. The idea that this slightly more digital form of life could be a threat is really interesting to me. So yeah, I don't know, it could kind of sneak in at the edges of the world. It kind of goes against the design of stuff like skulk sensors though, because those definitely feel almost like sea life in a way. They've got the kind of like waving tendrils to them. They definitely feel quite organic. So yeah, I think it's definitely a cool idea that they could repurpose somewhere else though. Just really interested to see where it's all going.
The skulk sensors do remind me of the James Cameron Avatar. The kind of vegetation that you see in that, with all the bioluminescence and the kind of lily cup shape that they have, you know, that kind of look that's meant to like catch moisture or insects or something. Like it just has that kind of interesting kind of look to it. Something that they could have, which I think would be neat environmentally. I really like the spore blossoms, and I'm not saying that we necessarily need more things like that, like skulk spores. It would be cool if there was some sort of environmental effect that would happen when you're in the Deep Dark. That's not just, you know, walking around in Minecraft in the dark. Some sort of maybe like you were talking earlier about like a blindness effect from a potion in an achievement. Like maybe there's something like that happens. I keep on thinking about, and again, funny that you mentioned sea life, because I kept on coming back to like stuff that's either stuck to the walls or stuck to the ceiling, like a barnacle, you know? And like, I mean, I know a shulker is very similar to that, but like just something that kind of could add to the environment. Maybe it's not a mob, but just some sort of plant that either does something or emits some sort of mist, or like anything that, I mean, maybe it harms the player. I've been playing a lot of Satisfactory lately, and there's these, I don't know what to call them. They're bug hills. They look like giant ant hills or bees nests. And there's a green fog around them that you can't go in without a gas mask because you take damage. And so something like that could be neat to try and like force the player through certain areas. Like you want to go around the warden, but you can't because maybe you don't have the gear or the health to deal with a cloud that could be poisonous. I don't know how hard or easy they want to make this. I know that King B Dogs, and thanks to you for sharing these with me, has been tweeting about like feeling that the Deep Dark and the skulk and sensors in the warden might be too scary for Minecraft. And there's an opportunity with some weird vegetation that they could bring in with the Deep Dark for it to be funny. I mean, I'm talking about barnacles and stuff stuck to the walls and maybe gas emitting, like maybe they make fart noises. Like how funny would it be if the sound sensitive skulk sensors would react to barnacles on the wall that would do everything from like a flapperjack fart to like letting the air out of a balloon really slowly, you know, like the little, you know, like just, I'm thinking about like the Bog of Eternal Stench from Labyrinth, if you remember that part of the film.
Yes.
Like just stuff like that would be hilarious. It might get tedious after a while. But if it's something that you could control, and I just, knowing the general audience for Minecraft is on the young side and keeping the fact that it's a fun game, I feel like that could add some levity and some uniqueness to it. But it's just me. Maybe that's my cartoonist brain going into overdrive. I don't know.
It's the moment of comedy juxtaposed with the environment of horror. That's I feel like a winning combination sometimes. And yeah, I feel like maybe that's straying too far into territory where it would be very difficult to explain to other adults that this is a game for adults when there's just like farting cones on the walls. But yeah, I do like the barnacle idea, and it's kind of half making me wonder if anybody's tried modding the barnacles from Half-Life into Minecraft. They feel like they might be at home in the Skulk as a biome for sure. But moving on to the Warden itself, though, I think this is still the feature I'm most excited about, and I think Firestar's email said the strong as the Warden is, you could avoid it by ducking under a pillar like you would for an Enderman. I do wonder, with King B-Dogs tweeting about making the Warden more intelligent and more menacing than previous, I do wonder if they have a solution for that. I was talking with my chat about it when we were streaming the Snapshots, and some people got me wondering if maybe the Warden, instead of being able to break blocks, because we all know that's something that they're not keen on entities other than players doing, or at least not being done without players sort of triggering that, what if the Warden could almost like phase through blocks, or if it kind of floats up to you in the same way that a spider climbs a wall if you're standing on a pillar. If it was able to phase through a smaller area of blocks, then that would at least prevent you from building a quick safety bar like you do with fighting wither skeletons, for example. And I feel like the effect itself could be kind of ghostly and kind of hint at the fact that the Warden feels like a very supernatural presence, whilst also incorporating a bit of gameplay. And maybe at that point it's incorporeal, so you can't even hit it when it's doing that, and you have to wait for it to phase back into being before you can really attack it. I thought of that, and then I didn't sleep for 3 nights. So what do you think, Joel?
Well, like stuff like that, I kind of wonder when King B-Dogs is tweeting about, like, is it too scary for Minecraft? I don't know if he's talking about too scary or too difficult. And I don't know if those things are separate. I don't really find anything in Minecraft scary. But again, considering our younger players, my niece who plays Minecraft in creative mode, she doesn't like the zombies and skeletons. I discussed with her parents about maybe picking her up Minecraft Dungeons for her birthday. And after a little talk, we decided, not yet. That sort of content is still scary for her, which is weird. I mean, as someone that doesn't have kids, I don't really get it. Because of how blocky and cartoony Minecraft is, but then how much of that is actually being scared, and scared because she's supposed to be scared of zombies and skeletons, right? Mm-hmm. So with the Warden being scary, I don't know how powerful they want to make it, but thinking about the non-corporeal thing, I wonder if maybe its attack, or however it attacks you, rather than just being a straight up punch like a iron golem. Skulk and the Deep Dark have a lot of sound kind of built in to the way that everything seems to function. If there was a sonic attack or a sonic blast, think about like Banshee from the DC comics. Mm-hmm. A sonic wave that would emit from the Warden, which means doesn't matter if you're under a pillar, doesn't matter if you're on a pillar, you might get knocked off. You might get knocked into lava. You might get you won't be safe from the usual kind of like mechanics that we use to avoid things like Enderman and Iron Golems, or even the Wither fight, when people dig a long tunnel and then fight the Wither from within the safety of the smaller part of the tunnel. So having a sonic attack that could either go through blocks or bounce around existing blocks and not have a safe way to stand would be neat. Or if you could block it, like if you could stand behind a pillar, but you'd have to be there at the right time, that turns into more of like a boss fight that you'd see in dungeons with like an area of attack from was it a redstone golem? Doesn't it have like a stomp attack or something? Yeah.
There's stuff like that. And even like the redstone golem even does stuff like laying traps around you. There's kind of like proximity mines it lays nearby and stuff like that. So maybe the Warden using its natural environment to kind of like block your path in bits and pieces, maybe create some temporary blocks around you so it's harder for you to run away. There's so many different options for it to be a more formidable opponent, and also increases the challenge for people who really want to fight it, but also, again, encourages that sneaking around it mechanic that I think is going to be so integral to gameplay side of things. Even if it just has a ranged attack, I feel like we're going to see a lot more people having to rethink their strategy for the Warden other than just, place a few blocks in front of it and shoot it with a bow from a distance.
Yeah. We've got an email actually from Raya's Awesome about the Warden specifically. And it says, "Hi, Joel and Pix. I had a great idea about the Warden. What if the Warden communicated with nearby skulk sensors rather than directly sensing you? This would encourage players to mine the skulk sensors and not kill the Warden. By breaking the skulk sensors, you would then disable the Warden's ability to sense you and allow you to mine whatever skulk blocks or loot chest you need. Hope to hear your thoughts. Sneaking away. Raya's Awesome." And I think this illustrates maybe the other side of things. Like, there's going to be a lot of players out there that don't want to fight the Warden, or don't want to feel that they have to. And I think that that's an interesting choice to give players. Like, if you want to fight, it's going to be a heck of a fight. But if you want to avoid it, like, how do you do that and still be able to use these blocks and do some cool things? And it did kind of paint the Warden as a bit of a gardener. Like, I thought it was really cool of this, like, giant, really monstrous, like, swamp thing under the ground. That's like a Minecraft Mr. McGregor, from The Tale of Peter Rabbit and Beatrix Potter. For anybody that wasn't born in the 2000s, you might need a refresher. But like, it's one of those things that could be, rather than having it being a bad guy, just having it being misunderstood.
Yeah.
And I think that might be cool for players to, like, there's going to be players that are just going to, like, Leroy Jenkins rush in and want to fight it. But I feel like there's an opportunity there to have it be a balance, right?
Leroy Jenkins, another reference you won't get if you weren't born in the 2000s. The gardener image, it kind of evokes to me, and maybe just because of the size comparison as well, but it evokes iron golems having, like, the poppies that they hand out to villagers. They're always kind of offering a flower, and that very Studio Ghibli-esque vision, where obviously Iron Golem's inspired by Castle in the Sky. The Warden feels to me a lot more like something from the slightly spookier Studio Ghibli movies, like, Spirited Away or something like that. It's this sort of unknowable spirit kind of thing that is fairly benign unless you cross it. Kind of has that vibe to me. And so, yeah, it does feel like the Warden is just kind of tending to whatever the skulk is down there. And, yeah, potentially we could see some, symbiotic relationship between them. I don't think removing skulk sensors should completely deaden its sense of hearing, because part of what they explain the mechanics of the Warden to be is distracting it by creating sounds in other areas of the environment. So throwing a snowball or an egg or something at a nearby wall, causing it to walk away so that maybe you can get away with mining a couple of things that are closer to you and further from the Warden. And I think that's really the way it's going to go. Completely removing all of the skulk sensors for the environment shouldn't do that. And in a way, the Warden can communicate with nearby skulk sensors if the player makes a sound that the sensor is then going to detect, because then the sensor is going to transmit to the nearest sensor, which is going to, chain it down the line until, if a Warden is nearby, that sound is going to attract the attention of the Warden, and it's going to lumber over to see what's there. Is the impression that I get, at least from the video that we've seen. So, yeah, I'm curious to see where that sort of symbiotic relationship begins and ends, but I don't know if just mining out skulk sensors is going to make us safe. I don't think that's the outcome that they want.
No, I agree. I feel like I also like the idea of running through the deep dark with a bunch of eggs, like flares in a jet plane. Like, you're being chased by the Warden and you're just like poop, 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 throwing eggs at the wall.
Yeah.
It's just silliness, right? You go down to the deep dark and there's a bunch of chickens around. You go, uh-oh, someone's already been here.
Yeah.
I just feel like that would be very funny. I don't know how they balance that. Because, I mean, again, like we've talked about with falling into a cave and dying in a mountain and being unable to find your entry point because of, like, powdered snow. Finding a deep, dark section of a large cave system where you really don't know your boundaries and where you got in, unless you've been meticulously planting torches your whole way down, and then getting one-shotted by this Warden is not going to be fun, right?
Yeah.
And so there has to be some sort of mechanic to engage and avoid or like fight or flight sort of situation. I don't know what that is, but I like the idea of obviously using the skulk sensors. And the last time we saw the warden, which hasn't, it's been a while, I believe its horns or antlers looked very similar to the skulk sensors themselves.
Yes.
So I'm sure there's going to be a tie between how it hears and them hearing you. I imagine it's both. Maybe the skulk sensors, like you said, increase its range of detection, and the less skulk sensors around, the harder it's going to be for it to hear you. Perhaps, like I don't know.
Yeah,
but I like all those ideas, and I'm looking forward to the eventual deep dark reveal. Even if it's something as simple as here's all the deep dark blocks just in the creative menu for now until we sort out the generation. I feel like we've been seeing this process right throughout the snapshots of like, here are the blocks, here's what they do mechanically, and then here's what they look like in generation. Now sometimes those generations are, well, no, I guess in all cases it's just specific, like all biomes. You have to do a custom world in order to see like lush caves and dripstone
for now.
But I'd imagine we'd probably see which might not be good. Like the way to test it and implement it now might be a single biome world where you have to do a special world where it's all the deep dark, which might not give the best player impression, because it's not going to be that at all. Because I imagine that would be, there's probably dozens of wardens walking around at the bottom of the world, which might not be fun. So I'm not really sure how they're going to test that without getting it to the point where it's really ready to be implemented in natural world generation.
But the warden is also something I expect to take a lot of play testing before players can really have the opinion that it's balanced. And obviously the developers are still going to have some say in that because they don't want players to have the easiest time. But yeah, I do think we're going to start to see the warden pop up relatively soon, just because of how much implication it has for exploration. If you don't want to run into these things, making sure that the experience is at least something you can run away from if you're not prepared. We'll see. The last thing we need to touch on before we wrap up is archaeology, which I think was previously one of the more, I won't say controversial, but one of the more kind of the more hesitant people were to discuss it, because they didn't really see how it fit into Minecraft. And I think a lot of people still have this opinion because we haven't really seen a whole bunch about how this has been refined since it was announced. What we do know, a couple of things I brought to this include Ulraf, who we know has been kind of working on archaeology, insisting that it's not intended as an education feature, has tweeted about how Minecraft really has a lot of archaeology already. If you look at things like desert temples and so forth, the impression there is that you are, taking a look around a site that has historical significance in the Minecraft world, and what that significance is has just been lost. Obviously, as players, my response to that being, typically it's been more of a Tomb Raider kind of approach we've taken to these things, where it's just kind of loot and run. But there are potentially, different play styles out there that they're trying to cater to, and people might have more of an interest in sort of imagining the history of these structures instead of just looting them for whatever resources they can grab. So a while ago, back after Minecraft Live and after some of these features had initially been announced, Ulraf invited a bunch of YouTube creators, this was Azuma, Cubfan, Etho, and Echo Soldier, to a roundtable discussion stream where they about what they thought about Caves and Cliffs features, and where archaeology was actually brought up fairly early in this discussion. Simply Sark also made a video about how he hoped archaeology would be implemented, and I think a lot of this has contributed to the early discussion that has now fallen by the wayside, because we've got stuff like caves being developed and everyone's very focused on what we've seen in Snapshots so far. So a few important points about what we know about archaeology. Ulraf said in the roundtable video that the diamond and emerald blocks we saw at Minecraft Live were placeholders, so while there might be valuable loot coming out of archaeology, it's not going to be a way to farm full blocks of diamond. They also want the brush to have a more broad use in Minecraft, so it's not necessarily just for dig sites, and they also don't want the blocks that you can get some of these rare items out of to be something you could identify with F3 debug info. So while the blocks that give you any kind of rewards will probably be limited to the dig sites themselves, it's not like you're going to be able to look at something and know exactly what's in it. they want there to be useful rewards. So things that, like, you know, maybe you're digging up some tools or something like that. Instead of farming tools from mobs, maybe you get them from or from villagers. Maybe you can dig up like an old enchanted pickaxe that will be useful for you or something like that. But then connecting archaeology to the lore of the game was a very important concept. He compared it to finding stuff like the Pigstep music disc in Bastions. It's not important for progression, but it's a desirable reward. And along the same lines, they wanted archaeology to maybe be another way for peaceful players to find the kind of items that weren't available in peaceful difficulty, in the same way that the Wandering Trader can sometimes bring you mob drops that you wouldn't be able to get because those mobs don't exist, like slime balls and stuff like that. They are also not against the idea of players automating the archaeology process once the mechanics around archaeology are finalized, and that it doesn't have to be a manual process. Overall, right, I think, going into my opinion about this now, I think the main problem with our perception of archaeology from the beginning is people insisting it needs to be quote-unquote useful and having a different view of what usefulness is. Like, as Minecraft players, we tend to get a little myopic about our preferred play style, and you and I are survival players, right? So I'd say when we find something like this, we're focused on whether it's a good way to acquire new resources or not. If you look at a desert temple, you don't necessarily think, oh, cool, an opportunity for story and lore and stuff to expand. You think, oh, cool, is this going to have an enchanted golden apple in it? You know, am I going to be able to get some bones for some easy bone meal? Or, you know, enchanted books, that kind of thing. And typically you're going to ignore whose rotten flesh is this that's been buried down here in this desert temple, right? But then they're trying to cater to a lot of different play styles with this update, and this seems like a feature that is for people who want to take a more considered approach to the environment and generate a bit more story based on things they find in the environment. And, I mean, I think as somebody who is building a museum in Minecraft right now, the archaeology thing does speak to me a certain way. I just have the survival guide mentality in the back of my head of like, okay, what can I then use this for? Which is maybe something that most of us have a hard time shaking off in terms of how we play.
From the outside, with as little as what we know about it, my initial kind of reaction to archaeology is in a game where you are mostly digging for stuff and then building stuff with the things that you've dug up, whether that's, I mean, I also consider like chopping down a tree digging, like just, you know, the process of mining out blocks in Minecraft.
It's harvesting resources more generally.
Yeah, but when they add a new game feature, and that new game feature is digging for stuff slowly, I'm not exactly excited for it.
Sure.
So you have to have some sort of reward in there for the player that's going to make that extra time investment to find an archaeological site, to dig the way that they want you to dig for archaeological rewards, worth it. And technical players, like I said, if they're okay with it, automating it, then sure, that gives some of those technical players a thing to do. For people that are like us, like builders and survival players, sure, there's some adventure and some discoverability, but building these clay pots that just kind of sit around, it's not enough for me. Now that's subjective, but like if it was something that was a little bit more flexible, like say instead of the clay pot with the little thing on top of it, it was just either the same size as or slightly smaller than a full block, and directional. If you could then, and this is me referencing some of the things that I saw in the Simply Sark video, not all of which I thought were good ideas, but this in particular I thought it was a good way to do it, was approaching the design on the block rather than applying a weirdly pixelated hieroglyphic that you really can't discern because it's a 16 by 16 pixel base. If you were able to then decorate the pot similar to how you've seen a lot of like classical Greek or Roman artifacts and pottery, giving it a top border or a center stripe, or like the same way that banners have a more robust way of being designed now.
Yeah.
And if that could be something that could be then stacked, treated like a log, have it be directional, that then opens up like a world of possibilities. It's the same kind of, not necessarily the same amount of time in for people that want to do custom maps. So like if you want to make a pixel art design on a 128 square section for a Minecraft map, you can then basically do whatever you want. You can recreate game textures, you can do a digital panel, you can do all kinds of cool stuff if you want to place that many blocks and make a map. If they did something like that with archaeology, where you could basically design your own custom block pattern with limits. I mean, like banners have limits. You can't do everything with them, but you can certainly come up with some unique designs.
Yeah.
That could open up a lot of things for builders. And if you could then either recreate them or do, like, I'm not sure how you would get them en masse, but if you could have some sort of system where you could get these custom blocks out. I'm just thinking about, like, imagine designing a big hall full of pillars, and the bottom pillars have these custom painted designs on them that you've managed to craft because you've collected enough archaeological fragments that you could make, 24 of these pots that then double as the base of pillars and look really ornate and cool. Like, that's the kind of thing that I think they have to kind of give it multi-uses for. In the same way that we talked about emergent gameplay last week, if it is a pot, if redstone comparators can then take a reading of what's in the pot, then like that's also cool. Does it hold water? Does it hold sand? Like what could you put in the pot that would make it useful? Having it be the only container in Minecraft, like a not a barrel is a bad example, but like a cauldron that could hold non-liquid, sand, gravel, concrete powder, like stuff like that could be neat. Like what could you do to a pot to make it a little bit more unique from the other things in Minecraft, but still operate in a familiar way? So people will be like, oh, it's like a cauldron, but not, right? So they still understand how it works, but then it creates another branch to the gameplay tree. Could be very, very cool. But yeah, the only thing that I think gets my ears perk up when I hear that they want the brush to have multiple uses. That's where I kind of go, oh, what other uses are those?
Yeah.
Like where like, is that where you start to get excited, or are you happy with just brushing off dirt and getting flecks of clay pot?
I'm kind of interested in all of this in some way. Like I think the brush having more uses is kind of fun, and I think with what the initial speculation being like, oh, you can basically carve down these layers of a block until you find a thing, but if you stop halfway you get a dirt slab. That has been debunked. That is apparently not going to happen. It's going to be more like a slower breaking animation for the block. I do wonder what the other uses of the brush are going to be, and yeah, that's curious to me. I do think there is still some interesting connections to be made on the lore side that feel more concrete than just like, oh, we'll never know. My main thing I want to share is that some people have speculated, and this is something that a conclusion I came to on my own, but then I did a quick Google search and I found a Reddit post on the subject as well, is that the clay pots that we've seen at Minecraft Live look a little bit like the pots that you find emeralds in Minecraft Dungeons. And this leads me to kind of suspect or, speculate a little bit about Minecraft Dungeons effectively being kind of a prequel game to Minecraft. And because we saw more of Piglin civilization in the Nether update, but it was getting to the point where there was like machinery around and they had a bit more technology, and there are piglins who throw fungus and stuff like that, I kind of wonder if that is Piglin civilization like in the past as far as core vanilla Minecraft is concerned. And by the same token, the pots that we're running around shattering that have emeralds in Minecraft Dungeons then become the shards of pot that we find in the ground when we're digging them up through these archaeology sites. Little stuff like that is occasionally giving me pause for thought. But yeah, I do think the pots are going to be fun from a decorative perspective. I mean, you look at the amount of builders who now use barrels everywhere in their builds, but then barrels have so much more function beyond that. They're a chest that doesn't have to worry about if there's a solid block on top of it. You can use them as a work site for villagers, and it still has the capacity of a regular single chest. what that means for the pots, I don't know. If they're just decorative, I feel like people might end up being a little bit underwhelmed by them, but some people will still find use for them in, Roman builds. If you want to build like a wine storage room or something like that, yeah, you'll find uses for that for sure. I think there's a variety of things that archaeology brings. I think what people are overlooking maybe is that archaeology has the potential to be the broadest feature, except for maybe just, caves being bigger now and the whole underground expansion thing. I feel like archaeology covers such a wide range of stuff in terms of gameplay styles in what it's trying to achieve. I feel like that might be the second most exciting thing for me, other than the Warden first, but then archaeology, I think, a close second, just because of the potential it has if they stick the landing at this point. So I'm curious. And if nothing else, finding these dig sites, even if they aren't quote-unquote useful, they're still going to feel like an event. Like, I compare them to fossils right now, which is, I guess, another archaeological aspect that has been added recently. Fossils aren't necessarily useful unless you want a ton of bone meal, but stumbling upon one is still an event, because they're relatively difficult to find. If you find a fossil, half the time it's like coming out of the wall of a cave, or in my case I found one in a ravine above lava, and it looked like the scene from Jurassic Park all of a sudden. And yeah, I just thought, well, the fossil dig sites are effectively kind of be the same as archaeology dig sites in a way, in that you'll find them quite rarely, and when you do, you'll be like, one of these, okay, like let me spend an in-game day here just kind of digging around, seeing what it has to see. It doesn't need to be something that completely transforms gameplay. It can still be a fun feature for you to dig around in. And maybe in the case of something like Clash of the Creators, finding an archaeology dig site and digging up some stuff becomes an achievement that's, potentially something that players can go and explore the world for a little bit. It seems like something that has maybe been overlooked in terms of just having fun stuff to populate the world out there.
ZeroFox75 in our chat is saying, I've always been hoping that with archaeology they might implement more paleontology to give fossils more use. That, and I love dinosaurs. So, I mean, who doesn't love dinosaurs? Yeah, like I like the idea of them trying to maybe tie fossils to archaeology. Maybe if you find an archaeological site, that there might be a fossil nearby statistically, encouraging more exploration and digging in the area. I don't know. I found a fossil the same way. It was sticking out of a ravine under my witch hut when I was doing the lighting, of all the caves.
Yeah.
Found it that way. I mean, I just left it where it was. I mined one block by accident. Like, oh crap, that's cool. I don't want to dismantle that. I'm going to dig around it. So like carefully, kind of mining the blocks out. Because it's one of those rare things that like once you find one, you don't really want to get rid of it, because like they're so infrequent that it's kind of cool to showcase it.
Yeah. Beyond that, What if archaeological sites are something we start to find underground? What if maybe some of these dig sites are in lush caves, or are maybe left behind abandoned mineshaft style by people who are looking to excavate an area of importance down there lower in the world, and maybe that starts to expose a little bit of ore, but then there might potentially be ways that you could brush down a block of gravel nearby, and that's got a higher chance of finding diamonds in. If you use a brush to break down some of the dirt around a fossil, maybe you find more bones that way, and tying it into, okay, you can acquire a certain set of resources from these areas of the world. It kind of, it just enhances the value of each of these individual structures that we already know, if you can start to use archaeology features to find out more about each one. So that has potential for me. That's the stuff that's getting me excited.
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if it's a delicate balance to add more lore, add more history, without giving too much that, you're not removing the player's invented history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a delicate line to walk. So I can appreciate the difficulty, I guess, in implementing something like archaeology, wanting to add more lore, wanting to add more sense of history, not wanting to step on players' imaginations, but then also trying to make it more functional and engage players on a bunch of different levels. So I mean, I feel like I've often on the show come down kind of either unexcited or perhaps even down on archaeology. And I don't want to dismiss the difficulty in adding a feature like this to Minecraft. So like props to if they can pull it off. I mean, like all the power to them. I'm hoping to be surprised, I guess is the best way.
Yeah.
I'm also hoping to paint with the paintbrush, but that's just me.
Yes, we'll see. We'll see if you get to paint your masterpiece after all. But hopefully, fingers crossed, we might get a snapshot this week. If not, we might get pranked this week, or we might get both, or we might get neither. We will see, but we will report on whatever happens this week on next week's show. For now, that's going to be it for this episode of The Spawn Chunks. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff we've talked about today at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, please consider putting in some value back in. You can visit patreon.com/thespawnchunks to join our community. Pledging at any level there gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live as we record it each week, and it gets us closer to our next milestone goals, which currently is a monthly Minecraft audio hangout, where we have a hangout much like this, but we get to talk to our patrons about what they've been doing in Minecraft this week. We are currently at 243 patrons, which is up from last week, and special thanks go out to our content engineers, General Patton 82, Greener Canuck, Hunter 555, Jumbo Sale, and Yitz for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on Twitter and Instagram, but a personal recommendation is by far the best way to share the podcast. Just poke a friend in the arm from a safe distance, tell them about The Spawn Chunks and where they can go to listen. Those locations are iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. Really, wherever you can find a podcast. You can email the show at the spawnchunkmail @gmail.com, and the RSS feed is on the spawnchunks.com. The patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Jonny, but online I go by Pixelriffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/pixelriffs, where I attempt to make sense of this crazy and wonderful game in a series called The Minecraft Survival Guide. I also stream 3 days a week on Twitch, where I do behind-the-scenes work for the Survival Guide. Usually check out some snapshots midweek if we've got them, and occasionally participate in events like Clash of the Creators. I'm also the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search. And aside from that, I'm at Pixelriffs on both Twitter and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Everything I'm doing online, including my illustration and design portfolios at joelduggan.com. Working on some pretty cool stuff right now that I can't share, but when that's available, you can look for it there. The Citadel Cafe is my other podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. Looking forward to talking about the Falcon and Winter Soldier coming up soon. And of course, you can follow me at Joel Duggan on social media and Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I play Minecraft, I build walls, and I build factories in Satisfactory.
Thanks for visiting The Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, and there's a lot left to discover.